Okay, so I'm going to dive straight into it. So, I've known Ramjee for decades, I think, a couple of decades, and I've known you really just as a journalist, as someone who's launched magazines that center around Bangalore, Explore City, the podcast. I had no idea that you spent this time in Delhi and you were a lobbyist. So, this book is based on your time as a lobbyist, and it's autofiction. So I was just wondering, as I was reading it, as a journalist, you must have had some crazy experiences, met some crazy people, but you chose to write about this time in your life. So I was wondering why, what took you there, and what made you decide this is what I want to write about, and why now?
Well, first of all, that era, that incident that I wrote about between 1984 and 1988 in Delhi when I was there, is probably the most important thing that I will ever do in my life, and that was of national importance.
Right.
And just as shall I tell you the brief story behind it?
Yeah.
So back in 1963, two scientists from the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, they went to Mettur to get 1 kilo of hydrogen, and the plant manager there was giving them a bit of a runaround and so on, so he delayed them. But it was a fortuitous delay. Because of that delay, they met my old boss, R.V. Ramani, who was the head of that plant, who said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, we need the hydrogen to make silicon metal. And silicon metal back in 63 was this revolutionary new thing that could make power out of solar. That's the main application in India, not so much chips. And he and they started to get talking and said, listen, if you're going to do this, let's do it together. And they decided to have a joint project. 17 years later, they perfected the technology to make silicon metal. All that happened between Bangalore and Mettur. And having done that, during those days there was industrial licensing. I had just joined the company in Delhi at that time. I was very young. I was 20 years old. I was just that young at that point in time. And everybody else in that profession was at least twice my age, at least. So I found myself very taken up by everything that I saw at that point. Everything was brand new, and I'm a Bangalore boy and suddenly in Delhi. So what happened was that the company, my boss, found out that in 10 years they projected that the demand for silicon in India would be about 25 tons a year. So imagine the surprise of the company when we learned that the Department of Electronics in Delhi was going to set up a plant to make silicon metal and make 200 tons a year. And we said that this seems a little absurd, what's the deal with it? And then on top of it, to add insult to everything else, they were going to import technology, while these people had spent 17 years perfecting the technology in India, and at that time, Indian technology was the mantra. Everybody wanted to follow that. So none of this made sense. There started a big battle. This battle went on. It cleaved the community. The person in charge of the Department of Electronics Technology, a very powerful individual, it just kept going haywire and finally bubbled up all the way to Rajiv Gandhi, and he had to take the decision. He was the prime minister at that point.
Right.
In the course of all this happening and the way that story ended by 1988, the CIA, the KGB, the French Secret Service, everybody came into it.
Right.
I'm 21 years old. What 21-year-old doesn't want to play James Bond at that point in time? The difference is I didn't have an Aston Martin. I had a 1962 Fiat where the doors opened the wrong way.
It wouldn't start
That's
as
right.
well sometimes.
It wouldn't start sometimes.
Yeah.
That's in the book.
Right.
So that was the story. So everything I wrote was about that story.
Right.
And finally I decided to tell the tale.
Right.
And there it is.
And you chose to do it as fiction. Did you set out thinking, I need to do this as an auto-fiction, or did you make that decision later? And also, do you think that the fact that it's fiction, did that allow you to be more honest than if it was stated as non-fiction?
Right. Principally, I needed to make it fiction because if I wrote it as non-fiction, corroboration would be difficult. Right. The only corroboration is I was there. And for many people, that might not be enough. How do you know I'm not making it up?
Right.
So I decided that I wouldn't make it up, but I would tell that story in a more entertaining manner. Fill in the blanks, color it a little bit, and so on. But all the key names, except for me, they're all real names in the book, including Rajiv Gandhi, R. Venkatraman, and some other people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that some of the characters that are in the book are have ambiguous morality. And I was just wondering if you were tempted, when you were writing the book, to sort of whitewash things a little bit, because would readers sort of be invested in this character or not? Or was that something you just thought was necessary for what happened, and that's the truth of what happened?
Not at all. No, I haven't whitewashed it. I mean, the sense that what I did was, the vehicle that I chose to deliver the story of the book was humor.
Yeah.
And so therefore, when I had to talk about some foibles of people,
Yeah.
I just chose the humorous side on how to apply it.
Right.
And that's just a path that I chose to be able to
Right.
write that thing as fiction. But nothing in the book really is fiction. Everything in the book is true. So the ambiguity of the characters, their pushes and pulls, etc., they're all real,
Yeah.
except to the extent that I would not have known in the minds of someone, but I pretty much got a guess.
Sure, and the way you have, you get some things done, whether it's like paying off someone or all of those things, which people might be a little, suspect of, but that's something you just felt that needs to be retained.
Yeah, there are two levels of bribery.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Number one is the bureaucracy, and they take money to pass things and
Yeah,
so on,
yeah.
pass. The kind of stuff that I did was at the very basic level,
Yeah.
because, as a lobbyist, one of the things that we get very adept at is that we have to get into the government offices. And there's a check, there are gatekeepers, there's
right.
people checking. So you have to make friends with all the reception officers, so that if you don't really have the time and you wink at them, they wave you through.
Right.
So in terms of bribery, it's not that I ever paid someone a bribe per se to get something done, but sweeten the pill here and there a
Sure.
little bit.
Yeah.
What was more interesting is how to make friends with the reception officers.
Right.
You had to go to the back of the building and eat chaat with them.
Yeah.
And how they would do that is they would be spearing toothpicks and eating chaat.
Yeah.
They break off and one give it to you. All right? Hey, James Bond had to do it. So.
Right. Actually, what struck me when I was reading it is how, and I don't mean this in a bad way, how much in common a lobbyist has with a journalist in terms of, a journalist probably has to do the same things, make friends with everybody, possibly pass money around. And it's interesting that your trajectory took you from being a lobbyist to a journalist. And how did you make that journey?
Wow. Okay. That's actually it's a very apt kind of a question. Yes, it's very, very similar, because what you do is, as a journalist, the first thing that you do is to try to connect the dots.
Yeah.
That's how you follow a story. You try to connect the dots and you follow it. Whatever path you choose to follow it, you try and get it there. You ask people questions and you go. This was back in the day when there was journalism, right? So now, basically what happens now, at that point in time is that I did have a lot of friends in journalism, because as you saw from the book,
Yeah.
I was in charge of keeping this story in the press for 2 years straight. And that's what I did. I managed to keep it in the Delhi press for a long
Yes.
time, and many of the journalists I've named, and some of them names have changed.
Right.
But I did keep it there. But what struck me is funny, and this is apt to your question, not one of them asked me to find out things that I could have told them about. Well, I had access to every file, I had access to everything that was going on. Not once did they think to ask me for information.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I have no clue, really. It just surprised me. I wasn't going to volunteer information, and I don't know how much of information I would have volunteered, but there are many things that I would love to have leaked.
Right, yeah.
Sure.
But you probably did as well, I mean, no? Okay.
No, my position there was very important. I can't have anything come back to me, because, I can do one wrong thing and just get completely banned from, nobody will talk to me afterwards. To build up the trust of everyone in the bureaucracy, from the section officer to the IAS officers, they have to like you.
Right.
And they have to trust you, because you learn things about them that they may not want to know. Nothing to do with corruption per se,
Right.
but there are many personal things that you find out.
Yeah.
So just remember that a lobbyist lives in the shadows. We get to see more things than journalists do, more than investigators. And when this whole thing blew over, there was a CBI inquiry, and my ex-boss and I were asked to come before the CBI and talk. And that's the first thing the CBI, he's saying, you guys know more about what's going on than anybody else does. So who made the money? And I had to tell him nobody did. It's an ego thing. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting for me that that the whole thing is just about someone's ego, and I think the title is so apt, your choice of a title, because it really did happen. This whole chaos over the couple of years was just for somebody's ego.
Yeah, it was.
It's really crazy. So you mentioned humor, choosing humor, and I have to say that when I started reading the book, I didn't expect a book about silicon metal to be as funny as it was, and I thought you were really good at depicting the absurdity of what was going on. So you chose to write it that way, and do you feel like when you're making comments about a system that is the right way to go, as opposed to like straight commentary about or lecturing about a system?
Just to pick two countries that have given a lot of literature to us over the years, the United States and the United Kingdom.
Right.
Over there, sarcasm, humor, these are all very important vehicles of delivery of information. We sadly don't have that in our country.
Yeah.
So basically what happens is if you're not serious, you're a joker.
Right.
So either you make jokes or you talk seriously.
Yeah.
And a lot of people actually write for the peer group, and I've noticed this, not everyone, but a lot of people try to do it. So the business of humor as a culture, as a part and parcel of literature itself, hasn't really evolved in this country. I'll say the exception is that on my other podcast I have called The Literary City,
Yep.
I once interviewed Abhay K, who's at the ICCR and so on,
Yes.
and he had edited a book of Bihari, it's English, I mean I don't speak any of those dialects,
Sure.
but I was astounded by how much of humor, natural humor there was. So I'm thinking that there's a lot of humor there in regional
course.
languages. It's just in English.
That we
Forgive my
understand.
favorite sign. We don't take our humor seriously.
Right. Indian specifically, and
Yeah.
you think our novels are.
It's serious sells.
Right.
I told Shiny a few days ago that if I see another novel about love, loss, and longing, I will stab myself with a knitting needle. Right?
So one of the things that struck me in your book is your perspective of Rajiv Gandhi. I think that you ended up spending quite a bit of time with him, and I was just wondering what that was like. It was an interesting time, I think, for us. There was this really young prime minister who was very different from the people who'd had that position before him. And I thought you had such a great anecdote about. Do you want to talk about that? The one where he's leaving the vice president's house, and he and his cavalcade, and you said, when he's the one driving the car that he's in, because he's the one driving the fastest, and the others are struggling to keep up with him.
Anyone here from the 80s in Delhi? No, I'll just tell you. Okay, so basically what happened was Rajiv Gandhi's cavalcade used to be 3 identical ambassador cars, all white. And the whole idea of having 3 cars, as one knows, is that you don't know where the leader is. So if there was going to be a terrorist attack, they wouldn't really know which one to do. And you only get one chance to do it. So your chances get reduced by 2/3
Right.
if the cars is there. But in Rajiv Gandhi's case, you didn't have to do it because he was something of a speed maniac.
Right.
He would just get into one of the cars, and when he did that,
Drove it. He decided to drive it.
he'd drive an ambassador at 120, 130 kilometers on Delhi streets.
Yeah.
And you should see the cars, they would tilt in such a dangerous way. And he used to get by with it. But one of the side cars actually rolled off one day and somebody died in it and so on and so
no.
forth. Of course, it was hushed up.
Yeah.
It didn't stop him, he still drove.
Right.
So 3 cars a waste. Everyone knew which car was
Which
Rajiv. That's right.
But do you want to talk a little bit about your interactions with him, and maybe an anecdote that's not in the book?
My interactions with him were basically coming from a degree of I'm just a young 20-something lobbyist,
Yeah.
like very junior in the hierarchy. I wasn't an important person. I was an important fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And I was meddling in a lot of things ahead of my years. And I had the chance to meet Rajiv Gandhi all the time. But I'll say it in perspective because, in hindsight, looking back after several decades, what was it like at that point? For any young person in Delhi at that point, Rajiv Gandhi represented hope. Because by then we'd already begun to feel that we were being held back, and you kept hearing about this and that, and getting a pair of blue jeans was a big deal, and
Yeah.
that's what we wanted. And so, and this was the way it was. And when Rajiv Gandhi came in, we have to understand that he was 2 years ahead of Mikhail Gorbachev on glasnost and perestroika.
Yeah.
He started all that in India 2 years ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so when we suddenly heard that there was going to be the end of licensing, there was going to be this, that, the other, and people were opening up, he embraced computers. He said, how come this country doesn't have computers? We shall have computers. And so the first thing they did, things that have had a remarkable effect on this city, for instance, was number one, zero import duty, which was unheard of at that point in time. And number two, anybody who wants to set up a software, anything, has to just be able to set it up, no licensing, don't get in the way. If you can't help them, get out of the way. Yeah. And these were things I know from my time there in Delhi. And as a result of which, the growth of the software industry was unfettered for a long point. Of course, I'm oversimplifying to make a point, but largely that is the truth. That is the arc of how things happened at that point. My feeling is any prime minister before him or since would have found some way to meddle in what was going on. And his biggest opponent to this was the bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy did not like it. The bureaucracy did not like departments like the Department of Electronics or Department of Science in general being headed by non-IAS officers. So the IAS officers felt, up to a certain point, they did have a point, saying that, look, we understand administration, we understand management, so leave that part to us. But then there was also the corollary, and this I heard sitting there in the corner, hearing Rajiv Gandhi say to Arun Singh, saying that I don't want those people over there, they'll just stop everything, they'll just thwart everything. Right. So there was that underlying battle that was going on, saying that this is a part of liberalization. If scientists should be put in charge of science departments, let them do it. If they want, let them get IAS officers to be the juniors to run the administration, not the bosses, which didn't sit well with my pals in the IAS. And these are all stray conversations that were going on. But everyone at that point in time was pretty much attuned to trying to get the country forward. Whichever party they were in, nobody was trying to thwart the other person from doing anything. And it was pretty much the case. Political games would always be played. But the main problem was as it moved forward in terms of the way it went, the question that I'm answering is, what was Rajiv Gandhi's role? He represented hope. Yeah. He didn't like the establishment. He wanted to change things. Many years later on, he fell foul to political interests, but that's a later story. At that point in time that I had any interaction with him, he was all like, why do we have to import technology? And he assisted us. And without him, this book wouldn't have happened.
Right, I was just going to come to that possibly that the battle that you won would not have been won if Rajiv Gandhi was not.
No, if he hadn't kept his head about him the correct way, he wouldn't have won. He didn't simply capitulate. Yeah. He gave everyone enough time to go on. Research. He gave the Department of Electronics enough rope. They used it to hang themselves, which is just great. So, so that was the deal. Yeah. But the story itself was too fascinating. It was so fascinating that it just stayed in my head. Every detail was vivid for decades. Right. It still is. Right. And it was. That's what I meant when I started by saying I'll never do anything more important. I also got to understand how RAW worked. Right. Who were the CIA people? Who were the attaches, and what made what sense? And during those overblown days of that brutalist architecture, Kremlin-looking Delhi at that point in time, what was it really like at that point in time? And I'm happy I lived that experience.
No, it must have been super interesting. But I think what you said in the book is that you thought the Russian spies were more effective, right? Was that something you said?
I just liked them more.
Okay.
One in particular.
But they were more open and with you, their interactions with you. You just knew exactly what they wanted, and
they didn't have, they weren't striking elegant postures all the time.
No.
They were just real, regular people. And, they'd tell you what's on their head. If it wasn't funny, they wouldn't laugh. They wouldn't try. But the Western people, they always had a sense of superiority. I'm not going to get into the value judgments on these things. Sure. Maybe they felt, I know that Indians have a great sense of superiority in Africa, so I'm not going to get into that. Yeah. But as far as they were concerned, their interactions with me was always coming from the point that I was chafing at the bit, feeling that why are they talking to me like this, like I can be easily manipulated.
Right.
But I had a job to do.
Yeah.
But the Russians were zero.
They were just your vodka and
that was the good part.
I have to say, when I was reading, the character, is his name actually Sheshatri is the person's name, or that was changed? Okay. The way he tries to manipulate things just basically because he wants to leave a legacy, he has his own baggage. It was a little bit depressing that something could get derailed so much just because of one person's malintention. But what did you want for readers to get from the book? How did you write it in this? Is it cynical or optimistic, or just this is reality, this is realistic?
It's a story. It's exactly what the story was, exactly what happened.
Right.
And it is the underlying thing is how just one guy could actually hold everything back. But it also goes back to a time of patronage and, you know, the old adage about it's not what you know, but who you know, and so on. And this guy's dad was a very important person in foreign policy.
Right.
And he was a great friend of Indira Gandhi's, and they had a lot to do. And this gentleman, who's in the book, who's tried to set up a 200-ton plant, he would use his dad's connection and quote it to the extent that at one point in time he was selecting who would be his boss in the Department of Electronics. And it became that bad at that point. And here's the deal. People didn't like him. Nobody liked him. People wanted to oppose him. But they couldn't audit the closeness of the relationship with Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't audit it, they feared it.
Right.
So he could just get away with everything. When Rajiv Gandhi came in, he didn't realize how much ground had been lost.
Right.
So he just continued to battle down the road of finding ways in which to do what he wanted. And others in the government helped us, especially a name that's a real name. He's a Dr. Maheshwar Dayal, he's an atomic physicist.
Right.
He was in charge of the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources. Their job was to replace fuel with solar, wind, and sea. This was their job. So wind farms, etc., etc. And he couldn't understand why, when he was in charge of doing that, the Department of Electronics would have anything to do with silicon, which in India was mainly used for photovoltaics. Maybe less than 10% was used to make chips.
Right.
It's mainly the photovoltaics thing. So he couldn't understand it. But he was Dr. Maheshwar Dayal, his brother was a very senior man, and so they're all great friends of everybody in that mattered. So we relied on him, and for him this was a great game.
Yeah,
So he loved it. So it was fun. It was good.
I can imagine. I'm going to open this up for audience questions. In a few minutes. Anyone have a question?
Thank you, Ramjee and Deepthi. That was really interesting session. My name is Girish. I was wondering, Ramjee, now, would you be able to tell us how the life of a lobbyist would be now in the present day scenario?
There isn't a life of a lobbyist now. And the way it went is very different at this point in time. At that moment, so to understand what a lobbyist does, that word comes from the United States, where people would go to Congress and try to get people to pass laws in favor of their segment or their industry or a company or a country as such. In India, Parliament over here, they don't understand what laws they're making. People tell them to vote, they vote. That's all there is to it. It's like how America is now, at least the Republicans. But as far as India was concerned, everything that happened in the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy decided what was going on, and they would use political help if they needed a law to be passed. All the thinking started with the IAS, who in many ways, I mean, I said something not complimentary about them, but one must understand that the country owes a lot to that particular community to have held things together in many ways. So it's a balance. But still, so when we lobbied, we'd have to go before people, try to find out things that didn't make sense. Like one of the companies that I lobbied for was Tamil Nadu Newsprint. It was the biggest newsprint making company in India. It still is, I think. And at that time, there was things that they were doing in technology that the Indian laws didn't have an answer for. So the revenue people would interpret it the way they could get maximum revenue, which means that they put a 50% tax on steam, for instance, which is ridiculous. So my job would be to go in there and try to talk sense into people, try to show them stuff in a very vague kind of manner, and don't arrogate myself to that. We did to the government what a lawyer does to a Supreme Court. That's it, exactly. You have a client's case, you take it before the people, and you try to make them understand where it's at. Except that I don't know what happens in the Supreme Court and what skullduggery happened. We had lots of skullduggery, right? That's it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Can we give a mic there, please?
Hi, Ramjee. My name is Tejas. We obviously know you as a podcaster, as a author now, and someone who's also read Explosity long, long ago. I wanted to know, now that I've heard about your political lobbyist career, how did you get to doing that and then get to where you are today?
As one of the unemployable dregs of society, it was very easy. Something opened up, somebody needed something, and off I went to Delhi, that's all. When I went there, I was 19. 8 years ago, when I left, I was about 55. So there's no career path to being a lobbyist. You just go in there and you do whatever you need to do. That's it.
Any more questions?
Hello, I'm Anagha, and the book seems like a bit of a thriller, a bit of an espionage novel. So, which tropes from these genres did you enjoy writing most in?
I actually quite forgot. I didn't know how to construct a proper spy novel, and my spy novel had a little to do with the Soviet Republic and so on. So I went out and bought some Ludlums and others and read them all very quickly before I started to write this, and understood how the craft went, what sort of storytelling narrative, what's the arc, how do they handle specific situations, and then I would use that, and then I try to marry that with my own innate desire to write humorously, so it came together. And then you start writing it. At the point of writing, you don't really think about this. You think about all this before. If you haven't thought about it before, your writing is going to come out not great. But that's about it. But yes, Forsyth, Ludlum, all these people, phenomenal. They're the masters of this kind of stuff. But I had a real story, so I told it. That's it. Yeah.
Any other questions?
We just have the time for the one, right?
One
Yeah.
question I can follow.
The profession of a lobbyist just seems very interesting. So what's the most interesting, or what's something you learned from that profession that was important in your life, or that you just thought was awesome?
It's, sorry? I'm sorry, what was the last part?
That you just thought was like an awesome thing.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Anything that you do, anything that you cause to happen has national ramifications. Nothing happens short of that. So if I were to go in and for the reason that my companies or one of the companies needed something changed, and I changed a tax law or changed, like for instance, one of the things I did was to enable Indian companies to borrow money from foreign banks. Never happened before till I took it there because we needed to do that. So I made that happen. And when you realize that happens and you see the consequences of what you do, you're just happy about that. You don't want to be recognized for it, but you're just happy about that. That's it. So yes, that's the most important part. It's another experience being in Delhi. It's completely.
I think that's all we have time for. Thanks. Oh, one question? Sorry, there's one question.
Is a bureaucrat career better or a lobbyist career better?
You don't get sacked being a bureaucrat. You get jailed. Lobbyists start by getting jailed. That's all. You just pull out of the shadows and put them somewhere. That's it. Today's lobbyists, I don't really know what they do or why they do it. I have no clue. But back then, it was very interesting because it meant something to talk policy, etc., etc. It was not one guy's whimsy. That's how it is.
Thank you, Ramjee.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
much.
For
Thanks
those
so
who
much.
haven't read the book, please pick up a copy. Ramjee will be at the bookstore signing copies.
Thank you so much.